ACSESS, Todd Hirsch. So Todd is an internationally renowned economist, speaker, and author. He's worked for the Bank of Canada, Canada Pacific Railway, Canada West Foundation, before serving as vice president and chief economist as ATB for 15 years. He also previously taught economics at the U of C and for the executive education program at the U of A. In recognition of his work, Todd has received the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum and Jubilee medals, the University of Alberta's Alumni Honor Award, and an honorary degree from Mount Royal. The author of 4 amazing books. Todd's latest is Spiders in COVID Space, Adapting During and After the Pandemic. He captures the inspiring and compelling stories of businesses and not-for-profits that reinvented themselves during the pandemic. Please join me in welcoming Todd Hirsch.
Well, thank you very much, Sheila. Is there a way we can check if people online, can they hear me okay if I keep the lapel mic button to my clip to my shirt? Thumbs up.
I can hear you fine.
Yes.
We're all good? Welcome everybody online. Welcome everybody in this room. Wonderful to be here. Now, Matt, are you going to advance it for me or should I do it? I wonder if I could. It might be better if I could. Is that all right? So I might like stand right in front of you. So you might want to like move somewhere else. And is there a way we can I'm just looking for a way to take these off, but maybe not. Oh, did we was I supposed to? Oh, we got a clicker.
You plug that in.
Sure. Oh, that's even better.
You know how to, yeah.
Yes. Perfect. Did you have me?
You're on camera there.
Oh, okay. Well, then what I'm going to do is.
They are remote.
Okay.
So that's just for the group here.
Perfect.
Amazing.
I love how we improvise and just go with whatever, right? I said it's 2025. If there's one thing we should know, it's how to improvise and pivot on the spot. And technology will be technology. I always say technology is here to help us, but it can't be our enemy. So we're just going to make this work this afternoon. The title of my presentation, From Frenzy to Focus, Finding Clarity and Control in a Chaotic World. And probably, if you're like me, a lot of you might feel like 2025 is a bit chaotic. Oh, is this going to advance on me? It's not advancing at all. Is it advancing for the people on line?
No, it's not.
It's not.
No.
Okay. Matt is going to see if we can get that going. Oh, that's okay.
There we go.
Oh.
Should be good to go now.
There we go. It feels like this isn't going to work. That's okay. I love this quote here, if you can read it. In a world deluged by irrelevant information, clarity is power. Harari, from one of his books, I think it was 20 Lessons for the 21st Century. I love this quote because maybe 30, 40 years ago, we heard that saying, information is power. And in the 20th century, that was probably true. But in the 21st century, in 2025, everyone has information available to them at a touch of a phone or a click of a keypad. Now our problem is there's too much information. Everyone has access to information, and we also know there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation. And we are deluged by all of this information, and it's really difficult to make any sense out of it. Clarity through all of this deluge of information is power. And that's what I hope to bring you this afternoon is some clarity in these big macroeconomic factors that are weighing on the economy. They're creating a lot of uncertainty and anxiety. I'm going to walk through a lot of the things going on. And then toward the end of the presentation, I'm going to give you some tools to help you navigate your way through all of the uncertainty. Anyone here do plank like this? Some of you? Yeah. I go to the gym and my trainer makes me do a plank. Now, I can't do one as good as this gal here. She's got this nailed. But to make the plank even harder, there is something called a weighted plank where she starts stacking weights. Feels like big 45-pound weights, but it's really like 10 pounds on my back. These are some of the things, and you can see if you can read that, staffing and recruiters. These are probably some of the things that you as recruiters and those who work for staffing companies are maybe dealing with. Making it more challenging, making your environment more uncertain in 2025. And even if you're not dealing with all of these things, your clients probably are. So we're going to unpack some of the heaviest ones, some of these, the most, significant of these weights, these things that are weighing on the economy and probably weighing on your minds. Let's talk first of all about cost of living, because we know that businesses and consumers over COVID, we saw this big swell in inflation, hitting almost 10% in Alberta, about 8.1% nationally at the peak of it during 2023. Now, inflation levels have come back down. The year-over-year inflation rate has come back down to where the Bank of Canada would like to see it, around 2.5%. But it has left this gap in how high prices are today compared to where they would be if we did not see this. Now, if this bar was here, it wasn't here, you could see this gap. But basic story here, the blue line is inflation over the last 6 years. The red line is, had inflation remained at 2%, in other words, if we did not see that big jump in inflation over COVID, had we seen a nice continual 2% year-over-year increase in prices, this is where we would be. And it's left a gap of about 15%. In other words, even though inflation has come back down, prices today, that overall basket of consumer goods and services, is about 15% higher than it would have been without that inflation jump. Wages have not quite kept pace with that. That has put a lot of price pressure on consumers and also businesses. And I can't help but think that this is going to weigh in employers' decisions around compensation and what wages they offer. Employees are obviously looking for higher wages. I mean, they're always looking for higher wages, but they're looking for higher wages in an environment where their wages overall have not kept pace with increased cost of living. So that's one of the factors that is weighing on a lot of people right now. Another, let's talk about the big elephant in the room, and that is our changing relationship with our largest trading partner, our BFF, the United States. Now, if you can see this picture here, did anyone see this? This was a little video. It was on CBC on the National a couple months ago. But I love the look on the eagle's face. It's sort of like, what the hell is with this goose? That is one mad goose. And if anyone has ever been chased by a Canada goose, this is a serious issue. Like, they can be quite fierce. And I think this kind of encapsulates the spirit of how Canadians are feeling right now with our relationship with the United States. And it was funny because I was giving this very same presentation to a group in Red Deer earlier this week, and sitting right at my table, which was right here, were a bunch of US guests. So it felt a little bit awkward, but I made the point. I think most Canadians can distinguish between, we're not angry with people who live in the United States. By and large, these are our friends, our neighbors, they're wonderful people. We're just a little miffed with the current administration and some of the ways Canada has been treated in that. We feel not only sort of angry, but almost even hurt, I think. It sort of has felt a bit emotional for Canadians because for as long as any of us have been around, the United States was always our big brother. Bit of a love-hate relationship at times, but mostly heavy on the love, right? In fact, before any of this happened, before COVID, I always chuckle at Canadians, because we kind of like to beat up on the US. We like to attack their presidents and things going on there, and it's always just a three-ring circus. And we kind of, say unkind things sometimes about Americans. But then you say, well, where are you going for holidays? Oh, we're going to go down to Vegas for a few days, or we're going to go to California, or we're going to go to Florida. We have a love-hate relationship. but heavy on the love. But now we feel like that has shifted on us. And it's left a lot of Canadians wondering, what does this mean? What happens next? Of course, a lot of this has to do with the tariff tantrum, which is what I've been calling it, and this wildness with the president, with these on-again, off-again tariffs. This has been, in my 30 years as an economist, I have never seen anything as wild as this. It's not just the idea of tariffs that are always wild, but it's this continually shifting sand of, are they going to be on? Are they going to be off? Now, if you've been watching the news, you see there's a new twist in the developments. A US court has ruled that Donald Trump is out of his jurisdiction imposing these tariffs for emergency reasons. In other words, they're striking them down, saying most of these tariffs he has announced, not all of them, but most of the tariffs he is not able to unilaterally impose. Well, this is going to make Donald Trump even angrier. So I don't really take this as good news, even though this court ruling on the surface seems to suggest that, oh, good, there's going to be no tariffs. I wouldn't believe that for a minute. I think this is going to irritate Donald Trump. It doesn't strike me as the kind of person that says, well, if the courts say, then, I can't, I'll figure out something else to do. I think he's going to be even angrier, and he probably will figure out other ways to try to impose these tariffs. So I would not take the court ruling necessarily as fantastic news. I would just take it as one more development in a crazy dramatic plot that is defining 2025 and is creating this wild uncertainty. I'm really glad, in a way, I'm no longer the chief economist of ATB Financial, not because I don't like ATB, it's a fantastic bank, but if I was still there and my successor, Mark Parsons, he and his team, they have to put together a forecast for Alberta in this wild environment. And I'm glad, actually, that is no longer my job, because forecasting in this kind of world really makes no sense at all. We could put together a forecast and spend weeks and weeks on our assumptions, and we can hit send, and Donald Trump will say something next, and the forecast is already outdated. So in this environment, forecasting does not make as much sense as trying to prepare for anything. And I'll get back to that point a little bit later on. But one of the points I want to make about our relationship between Canada and the United States is a metaphor that goes back to the first Prime Minister Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, who was famous for metaphorically talking about the United States and Canada as an elephant and a mouse. And he would say the United States is an elephant, and when the elephant rolls over, the mouse gets squashed, and that is Canada. And that has sort of defined a lot of our psychology as Canadians over the last 40 years. But I want to challenge that metaphor because I don't think the ratios are right. The screen is so small, you probably can't even see that little mouse there. I did the math on this. A mouse or an elephant is 250,000 times the mass of a mouse. That in no respect relates to the ratio between the United States and Canada. The way you measure size, you could do population, you could do GDP, you could do purchasing price, you could do all these different ways. Roughly, it's about a 10-to-1 scale. A little bit different depending on the measure, but rule of thumb, about 10-to-1 the United States to Canada. A 10-to-1 ratio between an elephant is more like this, a polar bear. A polar bear is about a tenth the size or weight as an elephant. Now, this is a different metaphor. I don't know about you, but I feel better being a polar bear than a mouse, right? A polar bear at least has some agency. We at least have some ability to kind of fight back. We are still a lot smaller. We are still a tenth. It's still not really an even match. But I don't think Canadians have any right thinking of our country as a mouse in relationship to the United States. I think we need to think about ourselves as a polar bear, which, by the way, I've never encountered one, but is a very fierce and ferocious animal. So it's an elephant to a polar bear. The trouble is, we're looking a little like this these days. Now, this is where I love ChatGPT. So if you can see that image, I don't know if you can see it very well at the back, but I typed into ChatGPT, give me a picture of a polar bear that is fat and lazy and kind of tired. And that's what comes up. It's fantastic. And I think this is the trouble Canada finds ourselves in 2025. As a country, and I want to be clear about that, I don't think it's any specific person or individual or company, but as a country, we've become a little bit complacent economically. We've had it pretty good for 40 years, ever since the free trade agreement with the United States was signed in 1989. In a lot of ways, even though economically the free trade agreement with Canada and the United States, and then later Mexico joining, has been an enormous benefit to Canada. But in another way, it's kind of insulated us from some harsh realities in the world. It sort of put water wings on us. You know, kids learning to swim, they put water wings on. Eventually, the water wings have to come off, though. But our water wings have never come off. We've always enjoyed this unfettered trade with the United States, an advantage no other country has had. And it's allowed us to be a bit complacent in Canada. We can get by without really trying that hard. And as a result, we look a little bit like this. And now we find ourselves with the rug pulled out from under our feet. What we thought was rock solid, a trade relationship with the United States, is now in question. And now we find ourselves kind of flailing. What are we going to do? The challenge for Canada is to move from this polar bear. Now, you're really going to love the next image. So then I said to ChatGPT, give me a polar bear that is strong, fit, and ready to hunt. It's kind of creepy in a way. I mean, I'm not a zoologist. I don't know much about polar bears. I'm pretty sure they don't look like that. But you see the comparison between the two. Canada, economically, our challenge is to move from the polar bear on the left to the polar bear on the right. How do we do that? Obviously, this doesn't happen overnight. Just like if you were training physically, you don't go, a physical training program doesn't last an hour. It's a process that could last months or years. The same way for Canada, for ourselves, our country, to move from that lazy, complacent polar bear to the strong, fit one. I think one of the things that the new Prime Minister has been keen on doing is, and even before he took office, is we have to figure out our interprovincial trade barriers in this country. The fact that, we have all these barriers to trade within our own country, and we've still done as well as we have, I think is testament to, in a way, how complacent we have become. We have to figure out a way to increase interprovincial trade. We have to work hard now to expand our trade partners around the world and not be so reliant on the United States. We have a lot of work to do with helping employers invest in machinery and equipment and software to help make their employees more productive. Labor productivity is something that economists have talked about for a long, long time in this country. And it's not about getting workers to work harder or longer hours. It's about getting them to work, in some ways, maybe fewer hours, but produce more. That is productivity. And that happens if they have the right tools in their hands. So we've got a lot of work to do as a country. This doesn't happen overnight. Prime Minister Carney has a huge, huge shopping list of things that he's got to get done. We'll see how it goes, but that is kind of where we're at in 2025. All right. Another factor weighing on the economy, on the macroeconomy, is more extreme weather events. This photo here was taken from the fires in Los Angeles back in January. I did not take that photo. I don't know who. I mean, this looks terrifying. I don't know who took that. I just pulled this offline. But we saw the devastation in a city like Los Angeles in January, unprecedented fires. Of course, we don't need to look as far as Los Angeles. Most of northern Manitoba today is evacuating. Swan Hills in northern Alberta, town of 1,700 people evacuating. Fire, flood, too much water, too little water, too windy, hurricanes, all of these more extreme weather events are having an economic impact. It is no longer just the subject matter of climate scientists and environmental activists. This is now a C-suite problem. Look at these numbers here from the Insurance Bureau of Canada. The number of claims for personal property damage up 115% since 2019. In other words, personal property damage, residential houses, cars, all of those things, it's doubled in 6 years. Sure, there's been a little bit of inflation. Well, there's quite a bit of inflation, and the economy has grown, but it hasn't doubled, more than doubled. But insurance claims have. And these are just insurance claims from extreme weather events. Insured losses due to natural disasters during the decade of the 2000s, so the year 2000 to 2010, those 10 years, on average, insurance claims due to natural disasters right around $700 million a year. 2023, $3.1 billion. It's not even in the same category of number. And wait for it, last year, $8.5 billion. $3 billion alone was from the hailstorm in Calgary, the most expensive storm ever to hit Canada. Not, I would say, the most tragic. You know, when people say, well, wasn't the Jasper fire more, damaging? The Jasper fire was about 880 million, but I would argue far more tragic than smashed windshields in Calgary, right? Like a town like Jasper, like a gem of a resort town in the mountains that everyone loves, that a third of it was eliminated because of fire. I think is more tragic than hailstorms or hailstones hitting expensive cars in Calgary. But still, a lot of property, a lot of damage in that storm. The point I guess I'm trying to make is that the costs, the insurance costs, have escalated to the point where everyone now is experiencing higher fees for insurance. Now, it may not affect you individually. Probably individually, your property insurance has gone up, but it's likely to be affecting your clients. Because even if your client is operating a business not affected by forest fires in Swan Hills or a hurricane on the East Coast, overall insurance premiums are going up. And this is why it is now an economic problem. Have a look at these numbers. The percentage of C-suite executives. So these are the David Suzuki's of the world. These are the people who sit in the C-suites of the most powerful and largest companies in Canada. They asked them, are you worried all or most of the time? These people, they're worried all the time about climate change. 2023, 59% were. Last year, 85%. And it'll be interesting to see what the number is for 2025. My guess is, in a weird way, that number might fall a little bit because now they're worried all the time about tariffs. Like, you can only worry so much about so many things. In some ways, this number might fall a bit. Still, climate change and more severe extreme weather events is occupying C-suite Canada. Now, I can't help but think they are worried all or most of the time because they are also concerned about the planet that they are leaving their children and grandchildren, like we all should be. That is a worry. But I think a lot of these folks are also worried because their companies are less profitable in a world where more extreme weather events are perhaps disrupting business continuity and also costing these companies a lot in insurance premiums. So more extreme weather events related to climate change in the here and now are already having an economic impact. It'll be fascinating to see what 2025 brings. I mean, judging by the news of these forest fires already, and it's still May, I don't know. We have to really hope for good rain in June. But not only forest fires, all of the more extreme weather events, everything from flooding to hurricanes to drought. Okay. So what does all of this mean for staffing companies, recruiters, and job placement specialists? In other words, ACSESS members. Well, there's a lot of things going on, and I think most of them related to how your clients are responding to this, their staffing needs and their recruitment needs. More uncertainty, without question. I think 2025, maybe how pivot was the word of the year in 2020. Wild uncertainty is the word in 2025. It's not even a new word. I mean, it feels like we've been living through uncertainty for a long time. But now, especially around our trade relationship with the US and the tariffs, a lot of uncertainty. And I think there's going to be hesitation on the part of your clients, companies that are looking for staffing and recruiting services, because they just don't know what this means, especially around the tariffs. So uncertainty, less client commitment. Are they going to be as willing to bring on new staff? There's something called labor market, a frozen labor market in the United States. They talk about this. I think to some degree it's happening here in Canada too. While companies aren't laying off a lot of people, they're also not hiring a lot of people, and people are not voluntarily leaving their jobs as willingly as they were back in 2020 with the quiet quitting. It sort of feels like that game of musical chairs we played as children, right? And everyone goes around the circle and the music stops and everyone runs for a chair and everything's frozen for a couple seconds to see who doesn't have a chair. No one's making a move. I think that is kind of how I would describe the labor market in this time of uncertainty. Maybe not laying off a pile of people, maybe not adding a pile of people, just less willing to commit. And also reduce churn in staff, which is maybe what I was talking about with the musical chairs metaphor. Not as many people willingly leaving, not as many people, companies willingly hiring. So where that leaves you is probably a question you can better understand since you're the ones working with your clients on their staffing needs. But I do think it is, this time of uncertainty, maybe a little bit less churn. It might add some pressures onto staffing and recruiting companies. All right, I'm going to have a sip of water since it is 28 degrees. From frenzy to focus, which is where we started the presentation. How can we then start to think about creating calm in a chaotic world? I want to use some lessons from the Stoic philosophers. Anybody here into Stoicism? It's kind of a trendy thing again already. The Stoics were a group of philosophers from around 2,000 years ago. It actually goes back even a little bit further than that. But around 2,000 years ago, there was a group of, we're going to get to some of them particularly, but a group of thinkers, of philosophers, who started talking and writing and teaching about Stoicism. Now today, when we hear that word Stoic, it has kind of come to mean something different. When you hear someone described as Stoic, it might describe them as unemotional, a bit socially awkward, sort of detached, kind of like Mr. Spock from Star Trek, somebody who doesn't really care too much about things, very stoic. That is not quite what Stoic philosophy was getting at. Stoic philosophy, rather than being unemotional, was more, we only pay attention to the things we can control. We don't pay attention or we don't give energy to the things we can't control. Let's have a look at a few of these Stoic philosophers. This is Epictetus. He lived from 50 to 135 AD. One of his best quotes, or one of his most famous quotes, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." How you react. This is really one of the essential tenets of Stoicism, is your actions and reactions. So we could look at things like the tariffs, things like extreme weather events. We can't control those things. We can only control how we as individuals and as companies react to them. Another Stoic philosopher, Seneca, from 4 BC to 65 AD. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. You've probably heard that quote, maybe on a fridge magnet or something. Who knew it was from a Stoic philosopher from 2,000 years ago? But it was around preparation. And this sort of gets back to my previous comments about forecasting being a bit of a waste of time, that the economist would work tirelessly and all the assumptions and inputs into the model, and here is the forecast, only to be outdated in an hour. It's almost foolish these days to put together a forecast. And it might even be a bit dangerous because I could present a forecast and you could write down all the numbers and you could go back and sort of do some planning and around that. The problem is that forecast is very unlikely to happen. Rather than predicting, we're better off preparing for anything that comes our way. And finally, we're going to talk about Marcus Aurelius. He was the emperor of Rome from 161 to 180 AD. He was the last of the 5 what they describe as good emperors of Rome. Anyone see the original Gladiator movie? He shows up in Gladiator. He was the emperor of Rome at the time, but he was a beloved and highly respected emperor. And he was he's today one of the most commonly quoted and referred to Stoic philosophers. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Again, sort of getting back to this, there's things you can control and there's things you can't control. You can only control your own mind. And we're going to talk about some of those things. Now, you're going to like this. So there's a group out there, a website. They go back to antiquity, to people like Marcus Aurelius and kings and queens, long before there was photography. And they try to figure out what would that person look like today. So they use busts and carvings and maybe some written descriptions that might exist. And they piece it all together and they put together an image. What would Marcus Aurelius look like if he was alive today? And that is what they come up with. Pretty fun, huh? Now, you might notice Marcus Aurelius is a very handsome man. And if there's one thing we know in 2025, you should pay attention to good-looking people, right? That is supposed to be funnier. I'm not really mean. I don't like it when no one laughs at that show. But let's see what some of the things that Marcus Aurelius had to talk about. One of the things he really emphasized was your own personal character. You can't control those outside events. You can produce or you can control your character and you can protect that. Another thing he talked about are actions and reactions. Sort of like how Epictetus was talking about, it's your actions that matter. Marcus Aurelius, his diaries that he wrote to himself, he talked a lot about focusing on the things he can control, his actions and how he reacts to things. And finally, he talked a lot about how you treat other people, our human connection. So let's look at each one of those individually. And I've got a little story for each one. Your character, let's start there. Protecting your character. Some of that comes down to know who you are. Can you guys read that at the back? Is it showing up okay? Yeah. Know who you are. Know who you are as an individual, but also know who you are as a company. Know who you are as a recruiter or a staffing specialist. Know who you are as a team, the company you work for. What is it you do? That question might seem obvious, but once you really start to explore that question of who are we as a company, who are we as a staffing recruiting company, the question is a little more complicated. One story I love to talk about in this regard is Domino's Pizza. Now, you might not know the whole story of Domino's, but it's actually, Harvard Business Review has written a lot about Domino's. But going back to the late 1990s, Domino's Pizza almost went out of business. Its market share had fallen so low, it was almost irrelevant, and it was almost bankrupt. They had the presence of mind to bring on a new president, and that president asked a bold question. The president asked, who are we as a company? What do we do? What is our character? What is it we produce? And if you tell me it's pizza, I might fire you because our pizza is garbage. We're almost out of business. What is it we do? Who are we? And through that conversation, Domino's Pizza came to realize, actually, they don't produce pizza, they produce convenience. That is their product. No one cares that the pizza tastes like cardboard as long as it shows up on time. So once they got that story straight, that their identity, their character is around convenience, that is when they leaned heavily into the 30-minute delivery guarantee. They were the first one to do it. They also invested heavily in technology. In the early 2000s, it was call centers. But they were also the first company, fast food pizza company, to develop apps. Now, today, we're all familiar with apps. Mostly they drive us crazy, but we all know what they're for, and we use them all the time. But in 2004, apps were not ubiquitous. This was sort of cutting-edge technology. Domino's leaned heavily into that tech, but they leaned heavily into the story of convenience is our identity. That is what we provide people. And once they got their story straight, once they understood who they were as a company, they started to grow to today where they dominate the market for takeaway pizza. It's not even really close. Second place Pizza Hut is far below them. But it was once they learned who they were as a company, their character, their identity. It is really important. So, Marcus Aurelius also taught us about our actions and reactions. And sometimes that means having to reinvent yourself. That is something we have agency over, control over our own selves. This story, maybe some of you have heard this. I bet Sheila has heard this one. Yeah. This story goes back to the 1930s, Cincinnati, Ohio. At the time, a soap manufacturer by the name of Noah McVicker. He had a really profitable, very successful company where he manufactured home cleaning products. But his top selling product was a kind of paste that he developed that you apply to wallpaper and you roll it off and it cleans the wallpaper. And it was a hit. Because the problem that a lot of American homes had in the 1930s is that wallpaper was very stylish and practical. Walls were made of plaster and they cracked easy, but the wallpaper covered that. So wallpaper was common, but also most homes were heated with wood or coal burning stoves. This created a real mess because the soot from burning wood or coal got on the wallpaper. Noah McVicker's innovative product cleaned the wallpaper. The product was a hit and Noah was a millionaire. Until, like everything in life, everything started to change. After the Second World War, more homes in the United States were converting to electricity or natural gas. They were not burning wood and coal as much. And as a result, their wallpaper was not getting dirty. And as a result of that, no one needed this product anymore. Demand was in free fall. Noah McVicker's company was in trouble. He needed to do something. He tried everything he could to boost demand for the product, but the problem wasn't the product itself. The problem was nobody needed it anymore. So Noah brought alongside onto his company his nephew, Joe McVicker, and that made all the difference. Joe was a great listener to outside perspectives and outside voices, and he listened to lots of people he asked about this product. And it was a conversation he had with his sister-in-law. Yes, it was a woman who solved the problem. She, of course, doesn't get any credit for it, but his sister-in-law said, well, you know, Joe, nobody needs this product anymore. Our wallpaper isn't getting dirty, but I still buy it. My kids love playing with it during craft time. Why don't you add a little food coloring? And the next thing you know, you've got Play-Doh. One of the best loved and best-selling toys of all times. But that's because somebody was able to look at it from a different perspective. Noah was too close to the product. He could only see it as a wallpaper cleaning paste, because that's what he invented it as. But once those outside voices were able to open up a whole new idea for what this product could become, it allowed Noah to reinvent the product and reinvent his company. He had agency over that. He didn't have agency. He didn't have control over people not needing wallpaper cleaning products. But he was able, his own actions and reactions, to reinvent his product and reinvent his business. And finally, Marcus Aurelius tells us how you treat others is really important. It's all about human connection. Now, this is a philosophy from 2,000 years ago, but I don't think it's lost on anybody. And maybe more important than ever in 2025, how we treat others, especially in the business world, is really important if we're going to navigate this uncertainty. It all comes down to human connection. Now, I always say for people who bother to show up to events like this, you're building human connection, you're doing some networking. I'm never worried about you folks, but oftentimes we do see more companies living in isolation. They're not building connections with others. We see individuals, we see senior citizens who are living in isolation. It's those ones that I worry about. Human connection is so important. Everyone remember The Queen's Gambit? That movie during the COVID times, or I guess it was a TV series on Netflix. Anya Taylor-Joy and Netflix, they made chess cool again. Now, that's Anya Taylor-Joy. That's me in grade 10. I don't know if you can see it very well. They put that in my high school yearbook, the nerve. I do not look very cool. I don't know why I'm holding a stool. It makes no sense. I am getting smoked in that game of chess, so maybe it was some sort of instinctual defense mechanism. I don't know. But I was in the chess club in high school. I was terrible at all sports, but I was good at chess. So I was in the chess club. Now, I think I need a conversation with Netflix because the copyright infringement here is quite clear that they stole the image and the idea. But Anya Taylor-Joy looks way better than I look. But the reason I talk about this is the game of chess. I love chess because it is a very mathematically elegant game. There is no element of chance in the game of chess. Any chess players? Oh, a couple, yeah. There is no dice. There is no turning of a card. Everything comes down to strategy and the connection between you and your opponent. When I was a little kid, my father, who also loved chess, he taught me how to play chess. And it was one of my best memories I have of my father because he taught me how to play in kindness. Once I understood the rules of the game and the fundamentals of how the pieces moved, we would play these games. And if you play chess, you know the rule is once your fingers come off the piece, the move is complete. That's the end of the move. So we would be playing chess and he would watch me pick up a piece and he wouldn't say, oh, don't do that, that's a bad move, or he wouldn't, he would just say, be very careful. He was teaching me how to play chess in kindness. Now, if I went ahead and made the move is over. But he was warning me, but he was teaching me in a kind way. In the game of chess, if you play it online, which I try to do, you play with these bots, as a mental exercise, it's it's okay, but it's not as fun as playing with a human being. And that is because there's no human connection taking place if you play online. Even though if you play chess, there's not a lot of chit-chatting going on, or there shouldn't be, but there is still enormous human connection taking place. And I want to end on that note. If we are going to navigate our way through this uncertainty, these wild, chaotic times, we've talked about the tariffs, we've talked about inflation and cost of living, extreme weather events. We can't really predict where this is all going. But if we take the lessons from the Stoic philosophers, we guard our character. We know who we are fundamentally. We pay attention to our actions and reactions. We have agency over that. And we pay attention to how we treat others and work hard to build human connection. If we do those things, we will be better prepared to navigate our way through a chaotic year, no matter what comes. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your attention. Sheila, I think we've got lots of time for questions. If there are any questions or comments. Question here, yeah.
For the next in the longer term? What's your viewpoint on that?
That's a great question, and I didn't really get into specific industries, so we could talk about a few. I think the ones that obviously are going to struggle the most, steel, aluminum, auto sector, because those tariffs are going to be in place. Those industries are, I don't know if I want to use the term in trouble, but they have some major, major challenges. Other industries in Canada, it's going to be a little bit more interesting. Resources out here in Western Canada, the energy sector, their bigger problem at the moment is low price, not necessarily the threat of tariffs, although that kind of looms there. But the energy sector, I think, will be kind of flat this year. I know in Alberta's energy sector, there is a lot of impatience because they haven't been able to build as many pipelines as they'd like to see. And now there's going to be a lot of pressure on Prime Minister Carney, let's get these pipelines built. But the Prime Minister, I guess to be fair to him, there's only so much Ottawa can do about it. It still has to cross other provincial territories and jurisdictions. And those provinces, just like Alberta, wants to have its say in what happens here, those provinces will too. And even if we were to start a pipeline tomorrow, It's a 10-year project. So in the short term, I think the energy sector is going to struggle a little bit. I'm more optimistic for other sectors in Alberta around the tech industries, around biotechnology, life sciences, health sciences, those kinds of intellectual property kinds of industries. For one thing, they're less affected immediately by tariffs because it's more of product development. But I think they're also going to have, the added challenges. They still need customers to sell their products to if their customers are being affected by tariffs and uncertainty. So I don't know if it's a very fulsome answer. Most industries in Canada, I think, are going to have a struggle this year. But I think Western Canada will probably fare better than Eastern Canada, which is where we see the concentration of the steel, aluminum, and auto sector. Yeah. Sheila would like to answer that question.
No.
What you said?
Can
No
the
worries.
question be also repeated for those of us online? Because we can't
repeat
hear the question.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry about that. So the question was around the construction industry in Alberta, because we are seeing a large inflow of people into the province. We are the fastest growing, not only economy, but provincial population. And Edmonton, Calgary, for sure, are leading all other cities in housing starts. I think the construction industry will do fairly well. But again, what might hamper that is, if you're a potential first-time home buyer, even if you've got the down payment, are you going to pull the trigger if you're anxious about your job because of tariffs? Like, in one way or another, tariffs trickle into all of this conversation. But not only do we see the construction industry in Alberta, home building, pretty strong at the moment, we're also seeing a strong commitment from Ottawa and the other provinces and municipalities that we've got to get home building. We're way behind. We've got a housing shortage in Canada. That is something that isn't going to take 10 years. It will take a little while. But the housing industry, construction industry will probably fare better than most others, I would hope this year. Hope so too. Jackie.
You said that you didn't think that companies were going to do layoffs. Why?
So the question was, companies were not going to do layoffs. Not all companies. I mean, if you're a steel producer, they're already laying people off. I think there is still a hangover from the COVID times when companies let people go and they couldn't get them back. So my guess is, and the knowledge in this room far surpasses mine, but my guess is what I'm hearing is that companies, it's just this wait and see. They don't want to lay people off if they don't need to, because they learned from 5 years ago, it's hard to get good qualified people back once you lay them off. Another metaphor you could think of is, some of us are old enough to remember Wile E. Coyote, not everybody in the room, but he would go running off the cliff and he would dangle there for a second or two. That's where we're at. And we're waiting to see, do these tariffs, are they going to be punishing and we have to lay people off, or are we somehow going to be okay? And in that case, we don't want to lay people off. So it's our Wile E. Coyote moment.
Internationally, do you think it's going to happen there?
So the question was internationally. Do you mean the economic activity in other countries? To a lesser degree than Canada, but everyone around the world is talking about these tariffs. We saw a couple of months ago, Donald Trump trot out his big chart. And like every country of the world, except Canada, weirdly, was on this list. So they're all worried too. South Korea potentially is going to get hit pretty badly. Japan, Europe, they're trying to negotiate. Britain just negotiated some sort of agreement. So I think they're all going to be keen to figure out, what does this mean for those individual countries? Are we able to get a trade deal maybe done? Donald Trump, I guess we can say what we want about the guy, but he's a negotiator. He's a deal maker, drives us all crazy. And his approach is keep your opponent on their back foot, always stumbling and bumbling around the dark because they don't know what the rules of the game are going to be. And that gives him the advantage, right? And that might be a good negotiating tactic. I don't know. It's too bad he looks at everybody else as opponents rather than as trusted allies and friends and partners in a global economy. He sees everyone as his enemy. I don't know whatever happened to that man in his life, that everyone is an adversary, and if you're not, we're going to take you over. But that's the way he approaches it. The rest of the global economy is also stumbling. And not only that, a lot of the world is dealing with, we're seeing the war in Ukraine and Russia and the horrifying situation there. And that's right on the doorstep of Eastern Europe. Also war in Middle East, Africa, all around the world, conflicts that also weighs on business confidence and consumer confidence.
So do you have any other advice other than plan for C-suite?
I guess the only other advice I might give, specific advice is tricky because it depends on that company's situation. One thing I'd always recommend companies is watch your balance sheets in times of uncertainty. If you're really over leveraged in something, it gives you less maneuverability altogether. In really, really good times when things are feeling prosperous, taking on some debt is not as risky, but right now it's a risky proposition because you might find yourself painted into a corner. This is exactly what happened to Weight Watchers. Does anyone know the story of Weight Watchers? Why Weight Watchers did not become the Ozempic dealer of the world, it's sort of their Blockbuster. Why Blockbuster did not become Netflix. Why did Weight Watchers not become the Ozempic champion? Because this is why Weight Watchers is out of business. But it's because they had taken on so much debt that when Ozempic comes along and changes all the rules for weight loss, Weight Watchers was unable to pivot in that environment. They were locked. They had taken on all this debt. Their model no longer worked, and they weren't able to pivot their way out of it. So I guess I would always recommend for C-suite, and C-suite people know this better than I ever would, but really watch debt levels right now.
Amazing.
You got a question, or are we ready to wrap up?
We're ready to wrap up. So thank you so much. Any final questions online or in person? Okay. Well, thank you.
With that, I want to thank you very much. And just as a closing, I want to thank Sheila for always inviting me back. Sheila and I have become actually really good friends over the years. And I don't know how many presentations I've done with Sheila already. And she is just a fantastic advocate for your industry and just a real bright star. So I just want to recognize Sheila a little bit in this too, and for inviting me back. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Todd. Thank you so much, Todd, for those very, very kind words. And yes, actually, Todd has presented. We have to thank you for being such a champion for our industry. Todd actually started presenting to our group many years ago, probably 2011, and presented every single year up until right before the pandemic, when in his greeting, he talked about COVID. And I remember most of us were standing there going, I wonder what that is. And so he spoke with it for us every single year. He spoke at our conference that we held here in 2023, and hopefully he'll be at our conference in 2026 in Toronto. So Todd, thank you so much, as always, for your incredible insight. For those of us here in Calgary, we also got to see Todd's amazing purple shoes, which I don't know if you saw my LinkedIn post, our exchange with Todd from a week ago. He did promise that there would be amazing shoes. If you don't follow or connect with Todd already on LinkedIn, please do. He talks occasionally about shoes, which is always amazing and fascinating, but also has some ongoing tremendous insight into the economy. So thank you, Todd. We're very grateful to have your insight. So thank you so much. And then just in closing, mark your calendar for May 11 through 14, 2026. We, ACSESS Canada, are delightfully co-hosting our annual conference with the World Employment Confederation. There will be upwards of probably 800 people from Canada, US, UK, Ireland, the list goes on, India. So it will be an amazing, amazing event. So watch your calendars. If you didn't receive an email directly about this or other events, please see any one of the board members. Will ensure we do get you on the regular distribution list. And then lastly, please watch for a survey. Thank you for all of your understanding on our technical little hiccups this afternoon. So thank you both, everyone in person watching our tiny screen, and thank you for those remotely in working with us through the challenges. So thank you. We look forward to your feedback and what you'd love to see for future events. So thank you so much for everyone online. We're going to sign off, and for those here in Calgary, I hope you can stay and mingle. Thank you again.